All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you again for joining us this afternoon. My name is Andrew Kaplan Mandel. I am one of the Rabbinic interns at Central Synagogue and the leader of The Neighborhood, our online community. And I'm so glad you decided to join us to build your knowledge about the very serious topic of elder abuse. A week from today is Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and both our Jewish commitment to honoring our parents and our concern for the elders of our community have prompted this panel. In Torah, there are very clear instructions about treating our elders well. And both cursing or striking one's parents were capital offenses in biblical times. And yet, as we will hear from our panel, physical, verbal, and other abuses are rampant in our midst today. A commonly cited statistic is 1 in 10 people over the age of 60 experiences abuse of some kind. And I have read studies that number may have doubled during the pandemic. One study found that for every case of elder abuse reported to law enforcement or social service agencies, 24 more go unreported. So this is a topic of real urgency for us to address. Now, with the help of our Central Synagogue neighbor, Marnie Benjamin, an elder rights activist who I will be interviewing tomorrow as part of our Coffee with Clergy series, we have assembled an outstanding panel of 3 experts, a doctor, a lawyer, and a social worker, to help us understand what elder abuse is, the warning signs, what to do if it is happening, and how we might reduce its prevalence. And I will make sure that we have time for questions, but please feel free to put yours in the chat, and I will be sure to use those at the end of the presentations that we will hear. This afternoon, we will begin with Dr. Tony Rosen. Dr. Rosen is an expert researcher and practitioner in elder abuse prevention and geriatric injury prevention at Weill Cornell Medical College, and he is a practicing emergency physician at New York Presbyterian Hospital. Dr. Rosen's research focuses on improving identification, intervention, and prevention of elder abuse in the emergency department and other healthcare settings. Dr. Rosen, thank you so much for joining us. I'll invite you off of mute, and please go ahead and share your presentation as soon as you are ready.
Hi, I'm certainly ready. Thank you so much. Thank you to you, and also thank you to Marnie Benjamin, who, as you mentioned, is not only a member of your community, but also certainly a member of ours. Just as you said, this is an important topic, we think. I apologize for my informal dress. I'm actually coming right from a clinical shift in the emergency department, and I think the emergency department, obviously I'm biased, and you'll hear a little bit more from me in a moment. I think it's an important place to think about this phenomenon and how we can do a better job of intervening and preventing. And so I think that, again, those of us that work clinically and those of us that work in the field of elder mistreatment think about this phenomenon and what we can do about it every day. But I imagine that many folks that are tuning in are less familiar. And so if it's okay with you, let's start with a video. Again, this is a video made by the New York City Elder Abuse Center a few years ago, but hopefully it orients folks a little bit to the type of behavior that we're talking about and thinking about.
Hello, son. Did you get my message? Hello, son. Did you get my medicine?
Damn it, Mom. Just got back from work. Give me a minute on wine, will you? Jeez.
I'm sorry. How was work?
How do you think it was? Nothing ever works out for me. It sucks. Mom, you got this pile of pills in front of you. You know how much those cost? What do you need a new one for, really?
But Michael, the doctor said that I need that new pill.
What do you know? You don't remember shit anymore. You know, if you don't like the way I'm helping, if you don't like the way I'm taking care of you, I'm going to put you in one of those homes. Think about that. That'll give some. Think about living in one of those places. I'll take you over to one of those places.
Oh no, Michael, please, don't say that. I'm sorry. I'll be okay. You're right. I've got all these pills. I can wait. Are you going to go to work today, Michael?
Work? Where do you think I've been all day? You are so clueless. I got to get out of here.
Michael, I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So, as you can hear, what we're going to be talking about is elder abuse and neglect, how you can protect your community, your family, and yourself. And so let's start from the beginning. What is elder abuse? It's defined as mistreatment of an older adult in most states. By state law, it's aged greater than or equal to 60. And as I get closer to 60, I'm hoping that moves, but it doesn't. In some states by law, it's 65, but here in New York State and at most, it's aged 60. And from our perspective, obviously, it isn't necessarily an age because as we all know, folks have different levels of cognitive and functional abilities that aren't necessarily based on age. But in addition, in this phenomenon, it's by a person in a position with an expectation of trust, or when an older adult is specifically targeted because of their age or disability. And the reason we bring this up, and the reason this is a key part of the definition, is a random purse snatching is an important crime, but we wouldn't characterize it as elder abuse or neglect. And that's why the definition is built in this fashion. Elder abuse may include physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and or financial exploitation. And one of the things that many of our research colleagues have identified is that many victims suffer from multiple types of abuse, either at the same time or over the course of time. So what are these different types of abuse? Physical abuse can include slapping, hitting, kicking, pushing, pulling hair. Psychological abuse can include verbally berating, harassment or intimidation, threats of punishment or deprivation, and isolation. Neglect can be withholding food, water, medications, as well as failure to ensure personal hygiene or provide physical aids. Sexual abuse can include unwanted touching, verbal sexual advances, explicit photographing, and financial exploitation, which is among the most common, can include stealing money or belongings, cashing checks without permission, coercing into signing contracts, changing a will, or assigning durable power of attorney. And we're going to talk a little bit about each. But as Rabbi Mandel brought up, elder abuse is common. It isn't something that we think about a lot necessarily, but it's over 10% of community dwelling older adults experience abuse or neglect in each year. And we think that as many as 20% or more of older adults living in communal care settings, such as a long-term care nursing home, may be victimized. That means here in New York City, where the Central Shul is and where many of us work, 50,000 plus people are victimized. 9 of 10 elder abuse incidents in the community involve family members as perpetrators, which is important for us to think about because we're members of families and members of a community. They're often adult children or spouses. One of the reasons that we care as physicians and lawyers and social workers is that victimization increases risk of mortality, emergency department presentation, hospitalization, nursing home placement, depression, and exacerbation of chronic illness. So it's medically relevant, really relevant. Unfortunately, however, the other reason we're here to talk to you about it is that it is vastly and dramatically under-recognized and underreported. We think from literature that actually was conducted here in New York State that as few as 1 in 24 cases of elder mistreatment is identified and reported to the authorities. So we're missing it. We're only capturing the tip of the iceberg. And there's a lot of folks that are suffering in silence. And so I came to you from the ED. I actually just came across the street from the emergency department right now. Poor Elaine was like wondering if I was going to make it on time, as was I. But I think that the emergency department is an important missed opportunity. And this is one of the things that I wanted to give you a flavor of some of the things that we're working on. We think that evaluation by a healthcare provider may be the only time that some abused older adults ever leave their home. Frankly, going to shul may be another thing, another time, again, perhaps less so in the COVID era. Additional research suggests that abuse victims are less likely to see a primary care provider and more likely to present to the emergency department. In addition, and this is what I tell primary care physicians when I present to them, if you have a fracture of your arm or an acute exacerbation of congestive heart failure, your primary care doctor is going to send you right to the ER anyway. And so the ER might be a great opportunity to identify elder mistreatment, but national research and evaluation of our practice suggests that we almost never do. And that's not too surprising if you know ERs. We have insufficient time to conduct a comprehensive evaluation. As I was saying, it's kind of busy in the ER. We have lack of awareness or inadequate training. The kind of presentation that we're engaged in giving to you now is not that dissimilar from the kind of presentation that we give nationally and internationally to physicians. In fact, I'm presenting at the International Federation of Emergency Medicine in Melbourne in a couple of weeks. Ironically, I'm not going to Melbourne. My wife said, "You're not going to Melbourne." So instead, I'm presenting at like 2 a.m. via Zoom, which is like 9 a.m. their time or whatever. But this kind of presentation is one that we give to doctors too. In addition, even if doctors know about this, particularly in the emergency department, we're not that interested in focusing on disease processes where we don't have a protocol on how to handle it. Well, why would I want to find that? What am I going to do if I find it? And so that's one of the things that we've done. You'll hear from Elaine Gottesman, who works with us here in the Weill Cornell Vulnerable Elder Protection Team. And I'll swivel the camera because certainly Marnie knows Alyssa Ellman, who's another member of our team. And what we did was we designed an ED-based multidisciplinary team. If you work in our field in medicine or in violence prevention, you'll know that many, if not most, big hospitals have child protection teams. But we knew of no equivalent elder protection team, so we designed one a few years ago. And you can see this little button here. The reason we have that button is that ER folks like things that are easy. Oh, if I'm concerned, I just press the button. And in fact, it's a consultation service available 24/7 to assess, treat, and ensure the safety of elder abuse or neglect victims while also collecting evidence while appropriate and working closely with the authorities. And I was not on call today, but Alyssa was, and a colleague of ours in the emergency department was, and we had a case just this morning. Our hope with this program is that it will increase identification and reporting by our ER colleagues while simultaneously decreasing the burden on them. Similar to, and perhaps unabashedly copying existing child protection teams. We've developed a lot of partnerships in our community, and this is relevant for those of you that work in New York City and live in New York City and are part of the New York City community, but also those that are outside so you can get a sense. We've actually, through the New York City Elder Abuse Center, we work with the police department, we work with emergency medical services, we work with adult protective services, We work with Safe Horizon, which is victim advocacy. We work with the court system. And you're going to hear about the Weinberg Center for Elder Abuse Prevention from Malya Levin, and she's going to tell us a lot about their amazing program. We also are lucky enough to be beneficiaries, as are many of the folks on this screen, to be beneficiaries of the New York State Office of Victim Services. They've been generous in funding our program, and we're hopeful that similar programs can be developed elsewhere. The last thing that I want to tell you before I hand it over to Malya is that we're delighted and a little bit nervous, but delighted that our colleagues in Colorado have just launched a similar program. So now there are 2 elder protection teams in the United States, and we're hopeful for more. But from our perspective, we're certainly lucky to be funded and appreciate the funding. We've had a little bit of recognition from our work. We are academic, and so we publish academically, but I'm now going to hand over. I'm going to stop sharing, Malya, so you can start sharing. And I think that in order to get through it, I'm happy to respond to questions. I'm sure everyone is, but perhaps Rabbi Mandel, unless there's a specific reason, perhaps we should go through all the presentations and then get to questions.
That is the plan, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Rosen. And yes, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I have some questions for you, but I'm going to reserve them for the end. And yes, I'd like to introduce Malya Levin, is the senior staff attorney at the Weinberg Center for Elder Justice at the Hebrew Home at Riverdale, where she has worked for coming up on 10 years. She has also served on the executive committee of the Elder Law Center of the New York State Bar Association. So Malya Levin, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here. I'm just trying to share my screen.
Tony may just need to stop sharing first. Tony, we're just going to ask you to stop sharing your screen. All right, very good.
Okay, I'm going to try again.
I thought I'd unshared my screen and an email popped up from my kid's school. And so I apologize to everyone.
No problem, you're fine. And Malya, I also have the slides if you'd prefer that I share.
Yeah, if you could share it. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty here.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Teamwork.
Perfect.
Just so you know, Malya, it's not my fault, okay? Just FYI.
I would never, I assume it's my fault with all things technology.
Just kidding, it probably is my fault.
Related. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Rabbi Mandel, and everyone, all the congregants. It's wonderful to be here. So my name is Malya Levin. As the rabbi said, I'm the senior staff attorney for a program called the Weinberg Center for Elder Justice. And we are actually the first of its kind elder abuse shelter in the country. We serve all 5 boroughs of New York City and Westchester County. We're located in the Bronx in Riverdale. And the conceit behind our program is something that Dr. Rosen just touched upon, which is that, as he said, most elder abuse, or elder abuse really by definition, occurs where there's a relationship of trust between the person who's experiencing the abuse and the person who's perpetrating the abuse. And as such, very often that abuse is happening at home, in the home, like the video that you saw, particularly where the person who's perpetrating the abuse is an adult child, a spouse, or another family member, which is so often the case. And so very often the older person is unsafe where they're living. In fact, the sort of central locus of the abuse is at home. However, the problem is a lot of the typical places where a person would go when their home is not safe, let's say a domestic violence shelter or even a homeless shelter, those places are really difficult for older adults to navigate because older adults may have health issues, physical, cognitive, or both, that just make it very difficult for them to navigate those types of systems. And also, as Dr. Rosen touched upon, elder abuse is correlated with with deterioration of physical health, increased, lack of independence, increased chronic illnesses of all kinds, a decrease in cognitive abilities. And so very often older adults who've experienced abuse need their medical needs sort of addressed alongside their elder abuse experiences. And when there's no place that can do that appropriately, people will stay in an unsafe situation because they have nowhere else to go that can address what they've experienced appropriately. So that's the gap in service that our program tries to fill. And so what it is it's located in a long-term care community, the Hebrew Home at Riverdale, which is a large nursing home in the Bronx. Clients come in temporarily, and there's no shelter area or building or wing. Clients come into the community and are placed wherever is appropriate for them medically. And then in addition to all the medical services they're getting, which are just the same as any other short-term resident of the Hebrew home would get, they have our little sort of SWAT team of lawyers and social workers who specifically go wherever they are in the community and address the legal and sort of emotional and social issues that have brought them there that stem from the abuse that they've experienced. So in my role for about a decade, I've been representing older adults in a variety of different types of court proceedings as relates to the abuse that they've experienced. And I also assist them in different types of transactional legal actions that may help to address the abuse they've experienced and sort of restore them to legal health. I'm happy to answer specific questions about the program, but what I wanted to talk about more specifically is, if you can move to the next slide. So this is some of the, so I was asked, Dr. Rosen kind of went through some of the definitions of elder abuse, and I believe the main source of many of the definitions that he cited is the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, which a few years ago released a report proposing uniform definitions of elder abuse in all of its different forms. And I was asked, one of the things too that I would address is, what is the legal definition of elder abuse? And as you can see, I have a blank slide here. I think the rabbi might have thought that that was an error, but actually it's intentionally blank. And the reason for that is, so, I'm an attorney, I practice in New York State. I know that this is an audience that may be national. My experience is primarily with New York, but I can speak with a broader lens as well. But here in New York, and really there is no nationally accepted legal definition of elder abuse. In New York State, there is no crime called elder abuse. There is a crime called endangering the welfare of a vulnerable older person. That crime is very specific though, because it's limited to somebody who's either a court-appointed or paid caregiver of another person. That's a prerequisite to be guilty of that crime. So that refers to only a very specific subset of types of elder abuse. By and large, there's no crime elder abuse. There's no definition of elder abuse in the penal law or any other law. We're sort of stuck with, certainly where it comes to criminal prosecutions, we're stuck with sort of the same types of crimes that apply to people of all ages. If someone's been physically harmed, we have assaults of various types. If someone has been financially harmed, we have larcenies or identity thefts of various types. There isn't really a separate scheme for older people specifically, which is really in contrast to people will often compare elder abuse and child abuse. And it's understandable why that comparison might be made, but this is just one of the many places where elder abuse is very much unlike child abuse, because with children, the entire conceit is that, children don't have full rights in our society. They have to be cared for, and the people who care for them have special crimes that pertain to when they haven't cared for them appropriately. In contrast, older adults do, or at least should, have full rights in our society. And so the crimes that apply to them are largely the same crimes that apply to anyone across the lifespan. So where does that leave us? Well, where it leaves us is with a variety of legal remedies. But I guess the question is, legally, what is the definition with regard to reporting of abuse? A lot of people ask about reporting elder abuse. Who can I report to? And again, I think that this comes from people's comparing elder abuse to child abuse. With child abuse, there's sort of a very clear avenue for reporting abuse. Most states have a central hotline. There's a very clear sort of streamlined series of steps that people take that are sort of set in motion when child abuse is reported. There's an investigation, there's a special agency dedicated to it, etc. With elder abuse, that really doesn't exist. What you have is a hodgepodge of different reporting schemes in different states around the country. Actually, in New York State, there are no there are no mandated reporters of elder abuse. I see, yes, there are separate crimes. I see that in the chat, it's being mentioned that there are specific crimes related to theft or assault of older adults in certain states that particularly pertain to older adults. New York isn't one of them. I know California does have some. So there are some states that have it, but there's no universal nationwide crime or definition called elder abuse. And in New York, we don't really have that at all. And so again, when you look at reporting, New York State is actually the only state where there's no mandated reporting of elder abuse, apart from by Adult Protective Services professionals. And often Adult Protective Services, which is a city and state agency dedicated to assessing risk of people over the age of 18, they are the main sort of locus for where these reports are made. And if a professional who works for Adult Protective Services believes a crime is occurring against an older adult, they are mandated to report that crime to law enforcement. But there's no one who, by virtue of their profession, is required to report elder abuse in New York State. So not doctors, not lawyers, not social workers, not nurses. In New York State, that isn't the case. There are every state has its own reporting scheme, and there are states where a lot of people, a lot of different professions are obligated to report. The question is, though, who are they reporting to and what happens next? Because, and it's very complicated. If you go to the next slide, I have some national resources here, and these slides will be circulated afterward. If you want to get more information about a particular state and what the reporting requirements are and what's recommended in terms of reporting suspected abuse of various kinds in a particular state, here, these first few resources are a great place to delve a little bit. But what I would say is, what's very difficult, like I said, and I think, to me, this goes back a lot to Jewish values and thinking about some of the larger issues that we're encountering when it comes to elder abuse. And that is, what's our attitude toward older people? Forget just our parents and the sort of commandment to honor our parents, but in Judaism and in a Jewish society, older people are revered for their wisdom and for the experience that has brought them that wisdom. There's no concept of retiring in Judaism. My understanding is that in Jewish life, an older person just continues to come into more of a position in society because of the experience that they've garnered with age. Sadly, in our culture, that really isn't the case. Older people as a whole, there's so much ageism. Older people are really infantilized so much and are very much sidelined in a culture that's very much focused on youth and newness and, sort of the next thing, so to speak. And a lot of, I think, the complexity of what exactly are we reporting and what are the consequences, comes into play when we think about how do we create a scheme that makes sense for reporting abuse. Because, and if you turn to the next slide, one of the questions is, why don't people report? Well, think about the video that Dr. Rosen showed at the beginning. This is a woman who it seems like is living with her son. I mean, certainly the behavior that he exhibited was problematic to say the least, and you could sort of see the pain that she was experiencing and having to deal with that. But if you asked her, does she want anything to change? What does she want? She might very well say that she doesn't want anything to change. Now, that might be because she doesn't know what her options are. That might be because she lives in a society where there are relatively few options afforded to older adults because of ageism, because we have a society where it's so easy to isolate older people. Older people can become invisible so quickly. Our transportation systems, our buildings, our education systems, they're all built with younger people in mind. And so, she may say she doesn't want anything to change because she doesn't know her options, but she may also say she doesn't want anything to change because she wants to protect her son. Maybe she wants to keep him there. She's afraid of what might happen if he leaves, what will happen to him. He was threatening her with being placed in a nursing home, and that's a very real threat. People are, and part of the ageism in our society might be that she might think that if he goes away, she could be placed in a nursing home against her will, or, she might be fearful of what will happen to her because of, again, the limited options she faces, but she might also want to stay with her son because she also believes that he needs her. So these are very difficult and complicated relationships. And we believe, again, that older adults are not children and they should have the right to make those complicated decisions, even if they're decisions that we believe are not in their best interest. They're not children, and so they have the right to make those decisions as they wish. I want to reference a congregant of Central Synagogue who I believe is on this Zoom, Dr. Judy Smith, who's just released an incredible book called Difficult that is specifically about the research that she's done about mothers specifically and their, quote, difficult adult children, and the types of relationships that mothers have to that mothers really endure, the lifelong mothering that can often happen, and the ways in which mothers can prioritize the safety of their children and the well-being of their children even above their own. So that's one huge issue to keep in mind when it comes to reporting of abuse. And of course, other issues are fear again, that if you think about the video Dr. Rosen showed, fear for the woman's own safety, fear for what might happen to her child, guilt, shame, self-blame. Again, whether it's a child, a spouse who you've stayed with for decades, a grandchild, someone else who you've let into your life. If you don't know, if it's something that you've sort of allowed to occur, you being the person who's experienced the abuse, you might feel very ambivalent about reporting it. And even if you're a third party and you want to assist the older adult in reporting, again, the question is, what's going to happen once you report? Again, with child abuse, it's pretty straightforward. With an older person, there could be a gray area. It could not be clear. Are they going to be removed? Would that woman be removed from her home? Could she end up in a nursing home? I mean, if you're not clear on what the options are, you might be reticent to report. So it's really important, I think, if you know somebody who might be experiencing abuse, helping them gather information and understand what their options are is really important. And if you turn to the next slide, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, well, here, I'm going to skip that actually in the interest of time. I can circle back to it quickly, but some of the legal remedies, the things that I do legally to address when someone's experienced different types of abuse. So the first thing is prevention, right? And a lot of this has to do with making sure that that older people, as they get older, shore up their legal and financial health so that they are protected and that they have appointed and surrounded themselves with people who are trustworthy and who know their wishes. So completing advance directives like healthcare proxies, powers of attorney for people who you trust. And again, we could have a whole other session about sort of legal health as we get older, and how that's such a critical step in terms of preventing potential abuse or exploitation. Shoring up simplifying finances, having someone around who can check your finances, making sure, having someone to check in with to make sure you're not falling prey to scams. I mean, so much of, once clients get to us where they've experienced abuse that's so severe that they have to leave their homes, to ever fully undo what has happened to them is really an impossibility. We're very, we try as much as we can, and we've had a good amount of success, but we try to be sort of forward thinking about it, because what has happened emotionally and financially and physically very often can't be undone. Criminal court, sometimes what happens, what we characterize as abuse can rise to a level of a crime. If it's physical abuse, if it's sexual abuse, if it is financial abuse of some kind. And so we at the Weinberg Center, and me as an attorney, I assist older people in reporting crimes to law enforcement and to the district attorney's office, and assist them in going through the process of participating in a prosecution against someone who's caused them harm. Sometimes, though, abuse can be very acute, but there isn't enough proof to show that a crime has been committed. Or there is a lot of proof, but the older person doesn't want to involve the person who has committed the abuse with the criminal justice system. Again, if you go back to that video of the woman and her son, I don't know what the full extent of what he has done. We only saw a little snapshot, but we could see that even if he's done a lot of things that might rise to the level of a crime, she might not want to report that for a variety of reasons. And again, We're very victim-centered at the Weinberg Center, and I am, as an attorney, it's our clients who direct our strategy and make overall decisions. So we are respectful of people who don't want to go the criminal court route. And if they don't, there is a number of civil remedies that are available to them. Again, the terminology I use is the terminology in New York State because that's where I practice, but there are sort of similar schema around the country. So family court, a lot of the abuse, the relationships between people who experience abuse and who perpetrate abuse fall under the jurisdiction of family court, because family court is for people who are related by blood or marriage or have had an intimate relationship. And family court has the ability to issue restraining orders that can keep somebody who's caused harm away from the person who's experienced the harm, even if the two people share a home. A lot of what I experience, and we saw this in that little snapshot of a video and in so many of our stories of our clients, is that a critical issue is sharing a home, cohabiting. Very often the person who's perpetrating the abuse may not have their own stable housing. They may be down on their luck. They may be experiencing mental illness or unemployment or a variety of their own issues. And so they've moved in with the older adult, parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, friend, whoever it is. And then the older person sort of can't get them to leave, and they experience this escalating pattern of abusive behavior. A family court restraining order can remove the person who's committing the offenses from the home. And it can do it right away, in contrast to housing court. And we go to housing court as well. We go both because we want to represent older adults who are trying to evict people who are abusive against them. And we also go because very often the abuse victims wind up facing eviction or foreclosure as well, because the person who was supposed to be assisting them in paying the rent, paying the mortgage, whatever it is taking the money for their own purposes instead and has fallen behind. And so then the older person is the one facing the eviction. And we know in New York City, there are so many people who are low income, maybe by every measure, but have such desirable housing situations. You think of the person or maybe you are the person who has a 3-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side for $300 because you've been there for 60 years. I just had a client like this. And of course, the second she falls behind on rent or whatever it is, the building is super aggressive in trying to get her out because they can then rent that apartment for $6,000 a month. So very often we're involved in defending against those proceedings. And then finally, in New York State, Supreme Court is where guardianship proceedings are brought. And that brings me back to the issue of capacity, which I'll just touch upon very briefly, because of course, capacity and an older adult's capacity to make decisions and understand what's happening to them is intricately tied to so many issues of abuse. What I would say, if you just flip back to my last slide for a second, is that we presume capacity, unlike with children, again, where they don't have full rights in our culture, and there is a presumption that they need to be cared for. With older adults, the presumption is that they do have capacity, and that when an older person describes abuse that they've experienced, they should be listened to and believed. Our culture has come a long way in the world of domestic violence in believing victims of domestic violence. I think we still have a long way to go in terms of presuming credibility among older adults. Capacity in general in the legal realm is task specific, meaning, as we all know, cognitive impairment is really a huge gray area. There's so many different ways and levels that someone might experience impairment, and they can very often, a person can have some degree of cognitive impairment and still accurately report abuse and engage in all kinds of legal tasks. And there are different standards for the level of capacity that a person needs to have, depending on the particular legal task that's before them. Mistreatment of people with dementia is in the few studies that have been done, is really, the numbers are staggering. People with dementia are so vulnerable because, in large part, because of the lack of presumption of credibility that they so often get, and they know it. That even if they tell somebody what's happening to them, one look at their dementia diagnosis and they're sort of dismissed out of hand. And this happens so often, and it's a real tragedy. But in in cases where there's a more global issue, where somebody suspects that more globally a person really lacks capacity, a proceeding can be brought to appoint a guardian on their behalf. And that's where a judge makes a more general finding that the person lacks capacity. That's really a remedy of last resort. I know that guardians have gotten a lot of bad rap over the last few years because of abuse, that there's so much power granted to a guardian. Guardians are often a necessity where there's acute abuse going on, in cases where a person is severely cognitively impaired. But again, it's a remedy that you want to hold in abeyance unless it's absolutely necessary. So that's my kind of on one foot description of what I do and some of the legal issues involved and some of the complexities. Thank you again for having me, and I'll turn it over to Elaine.
Thanks so much, Malya, for that. I have a lot of questions for you as well, and I hope our audience does as well, and we will get to that in a little bit. But first, we're going to hear from Elaine Gottesman, who is a geriatric social worker with the Vulnerable Elder Protection Team at Weill Cornell. Dr. Rosen mentioned this, and her team has cared for and helped ensure the safety of hundreds of potential victims of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Welcome, Elaine.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I will share my screen. So it's such a blessing to be here. Thank you so much, Marnie, for putting this together, and everyone for being here, because this conversation, picking up what Malya started talking about, the prevention piece, is such an important conversation to be having. Something that honestly, when I get involved in a patient's affairs, the abuse has already happened. And I wish I could have rewinded and had this conversation. So I'm so glad that we're starting it now. Many of you may know more than I do about this topic. So I hope that this really is a starter of a conversation, and that you can continue on your own thinking more about these topics. So I'm going to speak to preventing mistreatment for an older adult. Again, picking up what Malya said, having advanced directives in place, healthcare proxy, a living will. Essentially what this is about is planning for incapacity, for when you cannot advocate for yourself, and making your preferences known, your values known, putting it on paper so that someone else can, an objective party, can enforce it, and not leaving it up to chance. Just important to put your values out there and to put it on paper. So part of that is, once you find a trusting healthcare proxy, making sure that they know what your priorities are. And this conversation can be somewhat challenging, or not knowing where to start and how far to go. The Conversation Project is one resource that could be helpful for you. Basically, it's a website that provides conversation guides, easy to use in helping you find ways to express your values and have these conversations with trusted others. Connecting with others is another important thing. Isolation, we know, is a major predictor of vulnerability and can make someone more vulnerable. So the more you can make sure that you're being seen by others. So if making sure that you're connected regularly with a primary care provider or a geriatrician, even making sure that someone objectively is keeping track of you, watching you, being part of this neighborhood is great in terms of just making sure you're socializing, other people are seeing you, noticing you, and noticing when you're not there, noticing any other changes. Something else to be thinking about is, in your relationships, if you notice changes about yourself or in relationships, you don't want to come to the point where, I don't want you to come to the point where, excusing mistreatment as the person having a bad day. Dr. Smith actually has talked about this before too, where you could say that my son, my spouse had, my friend had or the home care provider I must have had a bad day, and excusing that at when it really should be taken seriously as leading to mistreatment. So just something to be aware of, noticing your own reaction, so that to prevent things from getting worse. And then for the times that you or someone you know is ever either getting care from an agency or in a short-term care facility or long-term care facility, just knowing your rights is really important going in. So knowing, here are a few resources, there are many others. Medicare Rights Center can be there to help you get the most out of Medicare, what kind of benefits you're entitled to, cost-saving programs. Within facilities, every facility has, there are volunteer ombudsmen who are there to advocate on behalf of residents, make sure that they're aware of the rights and make sure the standard of care is being met. That's a good resource to know in your area. And the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care is, it provides information on residents' rights and care issues. So here are just a few things to know about. And being in this conversation, talking about this right now, just knowledge is power. So knowing what to look out for is really important. I want to shine a light on financial exploitation because something like either scams, which are increasing in frequency, or someone just misusing your money, using money that is not funds that don't belong to you, that don't belong to them. This is an important thing to just highlight. So making sure you, again, like Malya said, making sure you have a durable power of attorney, someone you trust. Malya can speak to this better, but just knowing that the moment you execute a power of attorney, that agent has access to your funds. So just really making sure that that is, doesn't wait till someone is not has no capacity. So making sure that you trust this person. Other trustworthy contacts. So maybe it's not a family or a friend that that is that trusted person. Maybe you need to find establish contact with a bank contact or a financial advisor or an elder attorney. Local bar associations can be a helpful way to establish contact, get some information from an attorney. There's also, for example, another resource might be the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, helping you find an elder attorney. Another general thing is avoiding unsafe contact. So making sure you're checking your credit card statements and making sure there's no fishy expenses there. Blocking unknown callers, not opening emails or clicking links in emails from people you don't recognize. Making sure that people you trust have your credit card and not other people. Local banks may actually have some alerts that you can set up. So just those safety pieces could be something helpful. And then knowing the signs of a scam. Again, knowledge is power. So scammers tend to tell you that there's a problem or a reward at hand. They tend to put pressure on you to make you not think so rationally and think more emotionally, pressure to act immediately. And then they tell you to pay in a specific way. So those are some flags for scammers. And so if you feel that pressure when someone's sending you an email or a call, just stop for a beat and ask those around you, talk it through with those around you. The Federal Trade Commission and the National Center on Elder Abuse are a couple of places amongst many that have some more information about scammers. Another highlight I want to put on for prevention is what I'm calling caregiver burnout. There are many other things that lead to mistreatment, but one major issue that can lead to elder mistreatment is caregiver burnout. So I'm speaking to many people in the audience here might actually call themselves, I put caregiver in quotes because not everyone likes that term. A caregiver, what I mean, it's a technical term, but what I really refer to is anyone who feels responsible for the welfare or well-being of another person. And it doesn't mean that you're the hands-on care provider 24/7. And so that could be something, the burnout, something to tune into. Again, it could be you, it could be a family or a friend of yours. And so something to look out for. So recognizing the signs in yourself when you feel burnout, this could look like anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, feeling irritable, or getting overreacting to what might otherwise feel like a minor nuisance, that's something to tune into. And so if you do feel like that's something that you might be experiencing or might experience down the road, it's important to tune into yourself, know your limits, know when you need to step back, and enlist the help of additional supports. Those supports could look like talking to family or friends about the concerns you're feeling. It might be family or friends distracting you and taking you out of the situation, or pitching in when you need extra help. It could mean that you're turning to a therapist to start talking through some of these things. It could mean that you're scheduling for yourself pleasant activities like taking a walk outside and making sure that you do it X time of day, every single day, or very specific, holding yourself accountable. Something to be aware of for those who are caregivers: there are local services that many counties throughout the country, or most counties throughout the country, provide for caregivers. So I know in New York City, the Department for the Aging funds local caregiver support groups and individual support in every borough. If you want to find in your local borough, you can actually go to the Elder Care Locator, which will lead you to the area agencies on aging. It's a public service that the U.S. Administration on Aging provides, and you can type in your zip code and find elder care supports in your area. So that's important to know. And then sometimes you might actually need to not be the one who's doing the care, and you might want to outsource and get some hiring other help. So whether it's hiring home care or short-term respite care, or working with a geriatric care manager, considering that. So Medicaid actually recognizes the burden of unpaid family caregivers, and so they've started to, in some cases, you can, if an older adult has Medicaid, they can apply for a family member, non-spouse family member, to be paid to be their caregiver. Alzheimer's Association I plugged here because they do provide support throughout the country for those who are responsible for the care of those who have Alzheimer's or dementia, and they can help navigate certain conversations. Caregiver.org is another website that has a lot of resources. So there's a lot to say about this topic, and just quick note, it's caregiving is something that you do. It's not someone who you are. You don't become caregiver. So just something to be thinking about. So now I'll talk about advocacy and how you can take action. Here are just a few resources. So there are national and local advocacy efforts that you can be part of doing advocacy work as it relates to elder mistreatment, elder abuse. Some national efforts include Justice in Aging and the National Council on Aging. AARP also has policies that they advocate for. So what you could do is you could look these up, see what policies they're talking about, and call up your local representative and push for those too. Justice in Aging, for example, also advertises opportunities to provide your own narrative, so that basically testifying with your own narrative to support for certain policies. Elderabuse.org is another way you can get involved. So it's a group of people, of educators and advocates and researchers around elder mistreatment and direct service providers who have come together. They've grown resources around understanding, preventing, and treating elder mistreatment. You can donate to them, and a disclaimer is that members on this call, so Weill Cornell is leading the efforts in this coalition. And then one other thing to be on your awareness, there's the Elder Justice Act. So in 2010, this was a law that passed in 2010, the Elder Justice Act, to authorize programs and initiatives that would better coordinate their federal response to elder mistreatment. And it would do things like provide better funding for adult protective services, help create reliable data that would emphasize the prevalence of this issue, help create forensic centers to detect elder mistreatment. But the law and the efforts are majorly underfunded. So if you want to contact your representative and share the importance of the Elder Justice Act, encourage them to put it on their docket and provide funding for it, that could be something that you do as well.
All right, Elaine, thank you so much for that. And thanks to everyone for sharing your insights with us. We want to give an opportunity for folks to ask any questions they have. And while folks are gathering their questions, it looks like we have a few questions in the chat. So I'll start with Eric Weiss had a question. He was talking about solo agers who have to find a person to take care of themselves. You mentioned a few examples of ways that folks can tap advisors of various kinds, financial advisors, etc. But I'm wondering if anyone, Malya, I see you nodding, so I'm wondering if you'd like to come off of mute and say a little bit more about this topic.
Sure. So first of all, I'll just say I'm going to put my email in the chat, and anyone can feel free to follow up with me on email and have more of a conversation if there's specific questions, because I know we only have a few minutes now. So really happy to engage with anybody who'd like more in depth. The question of sort of aging alone, yes, big issue in the world of advanced planning, of course, and difficult. I would say, first of all, to kind of think more broadly about your network, perhaps. Is there in fact somebody who you could tap for even a limited role, who maybe you haven't considered, because, often, I don't know, I'll speak for myself as a New Yorker, we're kind of private people, we have our circle, and then we're kind of like, everyone else is sort of an outsider, but you can kind of take the opportunity to think, maybe there is a friend or, a child of a friend, because of course, it's appointing someone who's a similar age to you comes with its own risks, since you're kind of aging in tandem. So maybe you want to think about your friends' children. I know, like, my dad served as a default healthcare agent for somebody who he became friendly with, who lived in the same building as my grandparents, who, he approached the person, didn't have his own children, and he approached him afterward, and they wound up creating a nice relationship, and he served in sort of this limited role. So I would encourage expanding the circle of who you think about. Also, you can hire someone to do this for you, particularly with regard to managing finances. There are private attorneys. There are also professional services who will be money managers. But whether you're someone of means or if you have a sort of a limited, simple income, there are places that you can hire. And so I would encourage looking into that. And, there's oversight on the, with those places as well. And of course, you want to look into what their procedures are and how they sort of, how they manage funds and what the safeguards are there. And I would say also, with regard to healthcare decisions, if there isn't somebody who you really feel like who you could trust to be a healthcare proxy, who understands your wishes and values, I would really encourage then creating a robust written living will and trying to figure out getting that into as many hands as possible in terms of your primary care provider, other specialists who you might see, so you can be sure that at least the place where you've memorialized your wishes in written form, although of course, you're not going to be able to cover every permutation of event that might occur. You can put some basic values and wishes down on paper and try to figure out from a practical perspective how you can get those documents to follow you so that they're acted upon even when you're no longer able to sort of articulate them.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Malya. I also received a question about facilities. We've talked a bit about the ways in which relatives may be the perpetrators of elder abuse. We've touched a little bit on the ways in which hospital workers or nursing home attendants may be responsible for this abuse. The question is, what may be some of the conditions at these institutions, the way they may be fundamentally structured, that might be exacerbating the problem? There's both individual responsibility of the workers, but also the conditions that exist. And I'm wondering, Elaine or Malya, if you want to speak to the extent to which you think there may be reforms necessary at an institutional level in order to alleviate some of the stressors or other reasons why this may be occurring in the first place.
I'm happy to speak to it unless Elaine, if you have thoughts.
Malya, start us off.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you, Molly.
Yeah, and you can you can pick up on this. So I work in like I mentioned, our shelter is located within a nursing home. So I have a very, I would say, lovely and highly regarded nursing home. And so in my experience is that overall, the place where I've seen people are getting very good care. And caregiving, even paid caregiving, is a very difficult job and not a well-compensated job. The nurses' aides who are doing most of the sort of daily care for residents are not well compensated. They're usually people of color. They're often immigrants. They're dealing with their own very difficult stressors in their own lives. And then they're being, asked to do very difficult jobs for not a lot of compensation. Not to excuse any kind of abuse or any kind of rough or inappropriate treatment or to minimize it in any way, but just to say that there's a level of inequality that's inherent in sort of the hierarchies of a lot of the healthcare structures that I've seen. Better staffing. Especially in the face of COVID, there's been huge healthcare shortages, staffing shortages. Elaine and Tony can probably speak to this even better than me, but I know there's chronic staffing problems. Nursing homes, I know in New York State that have empty beds, but they simply can't fill because there isn't enough staff to staff them appropriately. And, organizations that are trying to make their financial systems work on a shoestring, and that means really stretching their staff thin, and that's not right, and that winds up with people getting short shrift very sadly. I think also nonprofit nursing homes are really a dying breed. We're the more and more nursing homes are for-profit chains, and so they're being run really with a profit motive first and foremost, and so that of course is causing them to stretch dollars, stretch staff as much as possible, which can inherently lead to, insufficient care, which can quickly bleed into abuse. I would say, we need to advocate for more funding to be, assigned to Medicaid, Medicare, a lot of the programs that fund these organizations. We need to, increase staffing mandates, but mandates that are funded so that these nursing homes have the funds that they need to be able to staff institutions appropriately. And then I would also say, and I think that there's been good movement toward this in New York State, but maybe not enough. We need to make sure people aren't going to nursing homes inappropriately. I know, it used to be, when I was a kid, like if you got to be a certain age and you just sort of like were a man and your spouse died and you kind of couldn't make dinner for yourself, you moved to a nursing home. And that was kind of like the way things were. It's really not like that anymore. More and more, the paradigm is aging at home, aging in community. But people who are doing that need help also, and that needs to be funded too. So funding people getting the hours of caregiving that they need at home so that they're not, they're not resorting to moving to institutions inappropriately when that's not really what they need or want, I think is important too, but that really requires all of us to be, active members of our communities and lobby for really the funding that will make it happen, because it's so easy to mandate staffing, but if there's no funds for it, it really ties, I think, an institution's hands. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks so much for that. Appreciate that. I'm seeing a few other questions. Louise, I saw your question about actually accessing a doctor at places like Weill Cornell. We now have some contacts here on the Zoom, and I'm hoping that they'll share their email addresses. Elaine will share her email address in the chat so you can connect with her and feel like you have a human being to connect with if necessary. And then Marjorie, I saw your comment and question, and I think it's such an important one to sit and reflect. There's no answer, I think, to your question, a simple answer to your question, but it kind of gets to the heart of what I've been hearing over the past hour, which is that there's such a catch-22 in a way, that those who are most vulnerable are also the least likely to be believed, and B, the least likely to report, because there is such a danger for the consequences of reporting. And I'm wondering, Tony or Elaine, if you want to speak to that at all, the extent to which, to what extent does this feel like a totally intractable problem given these odds, or is there any hope that you can share with us given these phenomena?
You know, it's a great question, and it's an insightful and central question. And I don't know that we have a perfect answer yet. Ultimately, as doctors in all medical conditions, we think, gee, is the treatment going to be worse than the disease? And that's part of the story here, is that we want to make sure that by encouraging increased identification, we're actually helping people. It may be intuitive. Hey, you know, this is something that's really dangerous. And if we listen to people and we trust them and we find it and we take action, that should be helpful. It turns out it's not that simple. And in fact, as part of our vulnerable elder protection team, we're trying to conduct an evaluation, program evaluation, which looks not only at the intended consequences, but also at the unintended consequences. And I think that's really, really important. But there's another part of your question as well, which is about vulnerable folks. The irony that you highlighted, that it's often the folks that are most likely to be victimized, and I use that word advisedly, let's say, to be survivors, are folks who are marginalized, perhaps disabled, perhaps cognitively impaired, and therefore less likely to be believed and focused on. And that's something that I do think we are in the process of changing. Laura Mosqueda and her team at USC, and I think a lot of folks, or at least some folks on the presentation know of her and her work, have focused on older adults with cognitive impairment can be accurate about being suffering from abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and we should listen to them. And I think that's a message that we deliver to physicians, and that we can remind each other as members of the community to deliver to each other. That having been said, or both of those things having been said, there's even a third part of the challenge, and this is something that we know pretty well from intimate partner violence and child maltreatment, which are fields of at least research, scholarship, and intervention that are more advanced than elder abuse, is that in general, folks don't want to be removed from the home with the abuser. They just want the abuse to stop. Like if you said to an older adult, hey, I know that your son is being abusive to you, we can put you in a nursing home and protect you. I think many moms would be like, whoa, stop right there. That's not at all what I want. And so it is a complex problem with complex solutions. It's not a, whoa, your blood pressure is high, let's give you a pill to lower your blood pressure. It's much more complex, with a balance between things that improve or ameliorate the situation and things that may worsen it. And often the same intervention, or the same intervention over the course of time, can be good and then not good, or can be detrimental and then helpful. And it's for this reason, among others, and again, this is, I apologize, sort of the summary of the answer to your question, Rabbi Mandel. Number one, we're doing our best. But number two, there's an old saying in our field in elder abuse, which is elder abuse. It's not rocket science. It's way harder. And so I apologize. We are certainly doing our best, but recognize the challenges and are trying to overcome them one by one, patient by patient, older adult by older adult, and trying to create scientific, reliable approaches, but we are not there yet. We hope that Marnie and Dr. Mandel will invite us back in 5 years and we'll have some good news to report in that area.
Well, and I appreciate as well your point that from the beginning of this presentation, that your team, the Vulnerable Elder Protection Team at Weill Cornell, was the first of its kind, and that you're only now seeing a facsimile of that work. And it strikes me that the partnership between various professionals of various fields is a critical aspect of this, because otherwise you're all just touching different parts of the elephant and not addressing the whole thing. So I'm glad. I think that's a glimmer-ish of hope. I am not seeing any other hands, but I do want to give our panelists any chance to say any final words that they wish to say before I close this out. Elaine, do you have any final words?
Thank you so much. I don't have anything else to say, but and I hope that this is, again, something that you can continue to talk about and think about.
Thank you so much. And Malya.
Thank you for having me. I think faith communities are a critical place to talk about this issue, because people who are faith leaders have so much gravitas in terms of being able to speak to some of the complexities that older adults who may be experiencing abuse are facing, and really counsel them and shepherd them through making difficult decisions around these issues. And because faith communities give such wraparound, beautiful care and love to their congregants and community members that can help to spot and intervene in elder abuse in ways that I think traditional social service programs just can't. So I think this is just the most important conversation, and thank you for inviting me to be part of it.
Of course. And Tony. We just got to get you off of mute.
Yes, thank you so much from me as well. And thank you again to both you and Marnie for inviting us. I think from our perspective, gosh, this is something we ought to be doing more. We really think that elder abuse is something that folks don't talk about, don't think about. And the more folks that know, gee, this is something that I had to be thinking about for my family, for my community, for myself, the more likely we are going to be able to protect each other. And so I think that Elaine and Malya and I are going to look to be able to give a similar presentation elsewhere. And we really appreciate the time. And of course, reach out to us with anything that we can do to be helpful. And as I say to my patients in the emergency department, I look forward to seeing you on the street, not in my office in the ER, but on the street.
Amen to that. Thank you all so much. I want to also note that tomorrow at noon Eastern on Facebook, I hope you'll join us, everyone who's here, for a special iced coffee with clergy, where I will be speaking with Marnie Benjamin and Margie Logman about their personal experiences fighting elder abuse. So if you'd like to hear a personal take on these questions, I'll be in conversation with them. I want to just conclude with a spiritual note. Psalm 92 says, Tzadik katamar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yizkeh. The righteous shall flourish like the palm. They shall thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. They shall bring forth fruit in their old age. They'll be ever fresh and green. Have a good day, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.